Imagine drifting off to sleep, not in a warm bed with soft blankets, but in a wooden hall filled with the smell of smoke, the crackle of fire, and the steady breathing of warriors beside you. This wasn't some romantic fantasy. It was everyday life for Vikings. And their way of sleeping could not have been more different from how people in the medieval era spent their nights. Tonight, we are going to journey into the world of Viking sleep and uncover why it stood apart from the medieval world in ways that may surprise you. For the Vikings, sleep was less of a private retreat and more of a communal experience. Picture the inside of a longhouse, the heart of a Viking settlement. These structures were built from wood and turf, often stretching more than 20 meters long. At night, families, warriors, and even animals shared the same hall. Everyone slept side by side, bundled in wool or animal hides. Privacy didn't really exist. Sleeping together meant warmth, safety, and survival during the harsh Nordic winters. The flickering glow of the central hearth lit the room, while smoke curled toward the rafters. Imagine trying to fall asleep with the constant smell of burning wood and the soft snorts of cattle just a few feet away. That was Viking sleep. Now, compare that to the medieval world of Europe. By the Middle Ages, sleep was beginning to look a little more familiar to us. The wealthy often slept in private chambers, sometimes with large canopy beds draped in heavy curtains to keep in warmth and keep out drafts. Servants or guards might sleep nearby. But the sense of personal space was far stronger than in Viking society. Even common folk in medieval villages had small cottages where families rested together, often on straw, stuffed mattresses. Yes, it was humble, but it was a step toward the private, individual sleep culture we know today. So why this massive difference? Geography and climate played a big role. Scandinavia's freezing nights made shared sleeping a necessity. A Viking family could not afford to sleep separately when huddling together was the best form of insulation against brutal cold. Meanwhile, much of medieval Europe enjoyed slightly milder climates and had access to stone houses and better insulation, allowing people to carve out their own sleeping spaces. The environment shaped the very way people rested. There was also the matter of belief and culture. Vikings lived in a society that valued strength, togetherness, and readiness for battle. Sleeping in groups reinforced unity. A Viking warrior might fall asleep listening to stories of Odin, Thor, and the afterlife in Valhalla, told around the fire before bed. Sleep itself carried a spiritual meaning. Dreams were seen as omens or messages from the gods, guiding warriors and farmers alike. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was a bridge to the divine. In medieval Europe, Christianity was reshaping people's relationship with sleep. Nighttime prayer, the division of sleep into two phases, known as first sleep and second sleep, and a stronger sense of sin and purity began to influence how people approached rest. A monk in a medieval monastery might rise in the middle of the night to chant prayers before returning to bed, while a peasant might spend the break between first and second sleep chatting, mending clothes, or even visiting neighbors. This segmented sleep pattern was common, but Vikings didn't follow it in the same way. Their nights were long, dark, and brutal, and once they lay down, the goal was simple: survive the night, conserve energy, and be ready for the next day's labor or raid. Another striking difference was in bedding. Vikings slept on benches or raised wooden platforms lined with straw and covered with animal skins. These hides were not just comfort. They were warmth and protection from damp floors. Pillows were often stuffed with feathers, though this was a luxury not everyone had. The medieval world, meanwhile, gradually moved toward more structured bedding. Mattresses stuffed with straw, wool, or feathers were common in wealthier homes, and ornate bed frames became a symbol of status. For medieval nobles, the bed itself was almost a throne, often beautifully carved and decorated. For Vikings, sleep was functional, not luxurious. And then there's the matter of security. Vikings lived in small, tight-knit communities where everyone was constantly on guard. Raids, rival clans, and harsh conditions meant you were never truly safe. Sleeping communally provided protection. If danger struck, a Viking warrior could grab his weapon within seconds. Medieval sleep, particularly in castles or fortified towns, reflected a different type of security. Guards, walls, and locked gates meant that those inside could sleep with a little more peace of mind. It was a different relationship to vulnerability at night. But perhaps the biggest difference lies in how each culture thought about time. The medieval clock was governed by church bells and the rhythm of religious life. Time was divided, ordered, and sleep was part of this larger schedule. The Vikings lived closer to nature. Their nights were ruled by the long Nordic winters, where darkness stretched for endless hours, or the bright summers, when the sun barely dipped below the horizon. Sleep patterns adjusted to these extremes. In summer, Vikings might sleep less, using the long days to farm, trade, or raid. In winter, the long darkness pushed them into extended rest. Their sleep was fluid, shifting with the seasons, unlike the more regimented medieval approach. Even gender roles in sleep were different. In Viking society, women oversaw the household, including sleeping arrangements. Families slept together, and the matriarch played a central role in ensuring the fire burned through the night, and that everyone stayed warm. In medieval Europe, noblewomen might sleep in separate chambers, sometimes with ladies in waiting, while men held their own quarters. Gender separation in sleep was more defined in the Middle Ages than in the Viking Age. One cannot ignore the symbolism of beds themselves. In medieval Europe, the bed was a stage for life events, birth, sickness, and even death. It was an object passed down through generations, a centerpiece of domestic life. In Viking culture, the bed was far more practical. Yet, interestingly, beds also carried spiritual meaning. Archaeological discoveries show that Viking women were sometimes buried in beds, suggesting that even in death, the bed symbolized passage to another world. So when we ask why Viking sleep was nothing like medieval sleep, the answer is layered. It was about survival in a harsher climate. It was about cultural values. Communal strength for Vikings versus individual order for medieval Europeans. It was about spirituality. Dreams as messages from the Norse gods versus sleep regulated by Christian ritual. And it was about environment. Long Nordic nights demanding togetherness while European structures allowed for privacy. Now pause and imagine yourself in both worlds. As a Viking, you lie down in a smoky hall, shoulder to shoulder with family, warriors, and animals, wrapped in furs, your axe never far from reach. The night feels endless, the fire dim, and dreams carry whispers from the gods. In medieval Europe, you slip into a curtained bed, perhaps alone or with a spouse, the sound of a church bell marking the hours, prayers murmured before drifting into segmented sleep. Two different worlds, two different experiences of the most basic human need, rest. And here's the most surprising part: modern science suggests that Viking sleep might actually have been healthier than we think. Sleeping communally provided warmth, reduced the risk of hypothermia, and created bonds of trust and unity. Medieval sleep, with its segmentation and night waking, may reflect a natural rhythm we've lost in the modern age. So while their nights may seem strange to us, both Vikings and medieval people lived in harmony with the conditions of their time. The truth is, how we sleep tells us more than just our bedtime habits. It reveals what we value, how we survive, and even how we dream. Viking sleep was a reflection of strength, unity, and survival in a brutal world, while medieval sleep mirrored the rise of order, privacy, and faith in a changing Europe. And when you look at it that way, sleep becomes more than rest. It becomes history written in the quiet hours of the night.